So, Tyler, what is Black Panther Wakanda Forever about?
Well, Black Panther Wakanda Forever takes place after the sudden death of T'Challa as his sister Shuri, once again played by Letitia Wright, and mother, played again by Angela Bassett, struggle in the grieving process while also enlisting the help of a young MIT student known as Ironheart, played by Dominique Thorne, in order to defeat Namor, played by Tenno Huerta, a mutant king of the underwater world, Talokan, looking to wage war against the surface world.
Were you looking forward to seeing Black Panther Wakanda Forever?
Actually, I was pretty scared to watch this movie, and I didn't have a ton of faith going into it.
And why is that?
Because no one can talk about this movie without mentioning the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman and how making the actor's death integral to the story to the point where before going into this movie, I hadn't heard anybody mention the story and characters who were actually in the movie. I just found it incredibly distracting.
Well, isn't it inevitable, or dare I say, necessary to acknowledge his death? I mean, chances are they retired the character as opposed to recasting him because, in their minds, no other actor could ever replace such a talent like him.
What happened to Chadwick Boseman was unfortunate. The fact that he stayed in as good a shape as he did, given the fact that he was stage free to stage four, doing his own stunts without that many people really catching on to it, was pretty commendable. And regardless of how the movie was going to play out, nobody can deny that the cast and crew had to work a hell of a lot harder than they had before. But it does rub me the wrong way that Chadwick Boseman didn't tell anybody at Marvel that he had terminal cancer and not very long to live, let alone very long to be a part of this franchise. This isn't like Furious 7 where Paul Walker was working on the movie and then there was that tragic accident where they really didn't have much of a choice other than to carry on the movie without him, so you can forgive the CGI effects. Because the CGI effects on Paul Walker's face in order to portray that he was still there, they weren't good. But there wasn't really much that they could do about it. The filmmakers didn't have a choice. And Boseman had an opportunity to be upfront with people about it. But he chose not to. Boseman had an opportunity to tell Kevin Feige, I don't have that much long to live, and Marvel could have had more time in order to process this. The cast and crew could have had more time to process this, and they would have been able to. They would have had more time in order to pave a way forward, as opposed to really only having from 2020 to 2022 in order to craft something on the dot. Because while I haven't gotten to the movie yet, this really does feel like it was made very hastily.
Tyler, I'm sure you can understand that grappling with a fatal illness and being faced with a limited amount of time to do what you love can be so devastating that people make mistakes dealing with it. And whether it was done out of privacy or pride, his health is his business. And how much he wanted to talk about it, if at all, that was up to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many people the past couple years have felt sick and barely able to get out of bed, knowing for a full fact that something is wrong with them, and yet they still showed up to work or to hang out with other people? I understand that there's an element of pride to it that every human being screws up with. Hell, I have this strange feeling that Chadwick Boseman might have kept this part secret about him in his acting career so that nobody could judge him any differently. And it's the way that I would want to be treated. Like, if I was going through some life threatening disease and critics and audiences and studios knew about it, I would be afraid that they would be treating me better or worse just because I was sick and or dying. I wouldn't want any of that. And if that's the motive behind Boseman keeping this a secret, I understand. But at the same time, during the last few months where I was on Twitter, it was right before Boseman passed away. I saw a picture of him at a Make a Wish Foundation where he was posing with kids who had leukemia. And needless to say, it's just too much for me to sidestep the fact that here are these kids who really have no choice but to be open and honest about it. And he could have shared with these kids that he's going for the exact same thing. I mean, how heroic would that be to see a kid with cancer being face to face with his all time hero going through the same thing? That can be very encouraging and optimistic towards that kid's future. Meanwhile, Boseman kept that to himself. And like you said, it is his decision to keep it a secret. It was his business, not ours. And as much as I go on and on about how actors spend too much time revealing so much about their personal lives to the point where whenever we see a movie that they're in, we don't see the character they're portraying, we see the actor. And again, that's probably what he was going for, and I completely understand it, but it's just the way that he went about it. The fact that he. It's a lot to juggle, and it just doesn't sit well with me.
Well, when you first came to me, you said you preferred judging art over the artists.
I mean, I will say this, though. Based on his work as T'Challa alone, he was a great actor, and he deserves to be remembered for other performances like portraying James Brown in Get On Up, his work in The Five Bloods that is eerily similar to his passing once again, or especially as Jackie Robinson in 42. I mean, that was the role that made him famous in the first place. Anyone who hasn't seen those movies should check them out. It shows just what a wide range he had as an actor and such a tragedy that he only had that short of a career.
Well, Tyler, with all that said, how is the movie as is?
This movie is really damn bad. It's nowhere near as big a train wreck as For Love and Thunder or She-Hulk, but this is still genuinely one of the most disappointing Marvel movies that I've ever seen, strictly because it tries to honor Boseman's legacy, replace him as Black Panther at the same time without even recasting him, establish new characters and settings for future movies and TV shows, elevate side characters to main characters, tackle what they consider to be social commentary. They try to do all of these things at once, and they fail at every single one of them.
Before delving into what you didn't like, tell me what you did like.
Well, it goes without saying that the cast still does good work as always. Letitia Wright, Danae... I'm not gonna fucking try and say this. Okoye. That's really the only name of hers that I can really pronounce. I can't even pronounce her fucking Walking Dead character. And I mean, I never watched Walking Dead, so I wouldn't really have much of a frame of reference anyways. But the two of them, Angela Bassett and Winston Duke, they all have the added pressure of having to carry on without their lead star and stay in character when discussing T'Challa. And while there are times when they're mourning the loss and looking at the tears in their eyes, you start to question how much of it is their character and how much of it is them speaking. But it still comes across as genuine, and I will say, they all show their dramatic range as actors more so than they had any opportunity to before. Letitia Wright, especially as Shuri, as opposed to being this happy-go-lucky engineer who does everything in the service of her brother and building machines just for fun, she's now given a higher level of responsibility she's unprepared for and would rather spend all day in her lab building shit to keep herself preoccupied and distracted. Just through her eyes, let alone her other facial expressions, she can portray the grief, fear, denial, and rage she's experiencing without speaking, sometimes interchangeably within the same scene. That's hard for any actor to do, but she really does pull it off. Okoye is given a much more physical role than in the previous movies. She easily has the best fight choreography in the entire film, especially in this rivalry she develops with a fellow underwater warrior. And her dramatic chops are shown in this one great monologue where she fails a certain mission affecting everybody, and she expresses how ashamed she is in failing. But you also recognize that she did everything in her power to do what was right. She's a warrior because she cares deeply about the people within her country. And as many people have pointed out, she was willing to go toe-to-toe with her own husband over the sake of protecting the country and over openly disagreeing what was best for both of them, let alone everybody. You really do feel bad for what happens to her, and it was what happens to her was an unjust decision, and I'm not even sure if I can go too deep into it with you without spoiling it, but needless to say, you felt sympathetic for her, and I never thought I would say this in any video whatsoever. She's never been my favorite actress by any means, but the best performance in this entire film comes from Angela Bassett.
Why is that a surprise to you? She's an Oscar-nominated actress.
Crash, Spotlight, and Green Book won Best Picture. So, what's your point?
All right, never mind. Go on.
Angela Bassett's just an actress I've always found too over the top and loud in everything, especially with 911 and Gunpowder Milkshake. Her line delivery was so exaggerated that it was comical, and there are a couple times where she does raise her voice a little too unnecessary, but here it actually is kind of warranted for her to raise her voice once in a while as we see her take on more responsibility as a queen in public, speaking in front of other world leaders and standing ground for her country despite the pain that she's experiencing. And that's actually what made her the best character, too. She's going through the exact same trauma as Shuri, but she has a lot more weight on her chest and theoretically should be the one in more denial than Shuri is. But she knows that if she lets the grief consume her, Wakanda will suffer. So unlike burying herself in work like Shuri does, she actually takes time, very limited time that she has as a world ruler, out of her day to sit in silence, feel the pain then and there, so that later on she can focus on what really matters. And as much as I complained about how over the top she can be, she's actually the best at communicating the character's thoughts and feelings out of the entire cast through body language and looks as opposed to dialogue during the scenes where it's clear that no matter how hard she tries to set a good example for Shuri, and despite everything that I just mentioned, even she can get blinded by her emotions sometimes. The decision that she made with Okoye made absolutely no sense, as I pointed out, but out of everyone in the movie, she has the most on her shoulder, and her performance highlights that in spades.
Was there anything else you liked about it?
Well, sometimes the cinematography stands out from other Marvel films. There are a lot of master shots director Ryan Coogler likes to use, where entire scenes take place in one take, where the camera follows whichever person is speaking, and then it'll quickly pan over to the next person to give this scene a sense of energy that it needs. There's a very good use of combining bird's eye view shots and close-ups that can portray a character's feelings and actions without dialogue, like this part of T'Challa's funeral where we get a bird's eye view of everyone in attendance and then a close-up of holy water being poured into the ground, which carries a great deal of symbolic meaning. In fact, water, needless to say, does carry a lot of symbolic weight in regards to the imagery and the cinematography. The biggest technical achievement in the film for me was the musical score that had me tapping my toes the entire time. Each piece of music matches the setting and culture that's being portrayed within that scene, and is very eclectic and creative in the use of various instruments, some of which are not instruments unless you actually beat into them, like the use of seashells and turtle shells for drums or these clay flutes. It's so indistinguishable. I never would have guessed that those were used as instruments, but they felt perfect for that environment. And the thing I was looking forward to the most was how the underwater civilization was going to be portrayed, and the parts that didn't disappoint me was a little bit of the visual look of Talokan. The CGI water effects were decent enough where half the time, with the bubbles they breathe, the water they swim in, it does look like they're actually filming undersea, but at the same time, there are other scenes where it's blatantly obvious that it was actually filmed underwater on a set as opposed to actors fake swimming in front of a green screen, and I'd be lying if I said it looked as good as the trailer for Avatar: Way of Water.
It does look beautiful, doesn't it?
It really does. I gotta go see it just for the underwater parts, even though I know for a fact that the story itself will probably suck too.
Whoa. We'll talk about that at the end of this session.
Okay. Anyways, the design of the citizens looked so cool. Their blue skin doesn't actually rip off Avatar like I thought it was going to. It actually ties into the story in a clever way. They have these breathing masks where, as opposed to needing oxygen, they have gills, so their masks are actually filled with water. That part I thought was super ingenious. Some of their costumes and weaponry was even ocean-themed in ways that I never could have imagined. The warrior that Okoye is rivals with has the skull of a hammerhead shark as a helmet. I mean, how cool is that?
So cool. That just sounds breathtaking. It sounds incredibly awesome and badass. You know, you haven't brought up how the movie pays tribute to Chadwick Boseman or T'Challa yet.
Yeah, that's because it's one of the big problems I had with the film. The opening scene, as I suspected, was him dying. And as opposed to having a stunt double portray him in costume, having him die a hero, facing off against a great threat to Wakanda, possibly perishing at the hands of the main villain to make him intimidating, and also to make his death considerably more tragic, he's off screen to death by a mystery illness. And as if that wasn't enough of a buzzkill, as if that wasn't strange, when they're at the funeral procession, the majority of citizens are actually smiling as they're playing their instruments and they are dancing in front of a mural of T'Challa while the queen, the princess, and the bodyguards all look like they're about to start bawling. And look, I know a lot of people are going to say that's a cultural way of saying he's in a better place for eternity, he no longer has to suffer, and I get the significance of that, but he literally just died. Wouldn't you want to wait a couple weeks or a month before celebrating it in such a fashion? I mean, I cater for celebrations of life, and they take place a while, or at least long enough where people can actually smile and laugh about the good memories that they had with their previous loved ones. This didn't really feel like it. And again, there's probably some context I don't know about, but they didn't do a good job at explaining it that way.
I have to say, I'm not familiar with the proceedings or the cultures that this is inspired from, so I can't really answer that for you either. But please continue.
Yeah, I can't really remember what I was gonna say. Hell, I couldn't even remember that T'Challa's death was even part of the movie half the time, even though it's called Black Panther. And that's the big thing about Wakanda Forever. He keeps forgetting on what characters within the story to focus on. Characterization and screen time is so uneven to the point where it wasn't until halfway through the movie that there was even a main character, let alone a brand new Black Panther. For the first hour or so, it's this cluttered ensemble where the focus keeps switching from Shuri to the Queen to Okoye, this random new bodyguard who gets 2 scenes to talk and then disappears into the background after kissing a woman on the cheek, which I guess was their way of saying that she's LGBTQ. Even Namor, as the villain, enters very abruptly into the picture. His dialogue was so off. Somebody asks, "Who are you?" and then gives this long-winded speech that came completely out of nowhere. And then he disappears for like an hour while his minions do most of the work for him, and that's why they make a bigger impression than him. Not to mention, so many of these characters have absolutely no purpose to be in it other than they were in the first one. Martin Freeman did not need to come back. Everything he does, someone else could have done for him and saved a hell of a lot of time. And there's also this weird out-of-character scene where he assumes that Wakanda committed a terrorist attack over vibranium, even though he has spent more than enough time with him to know that they would never do such a thing. But he's a white guy with power, so he must instantly assume the worst in black people, apparently. That fucking made no sense whatsoever. Winston Duke is in Baku, does nothing. Shuri even looks at him once and asks, "Why are you here?" And that is a legitimate question. They do try and make him a wise mentor figure towards the very end, but Lupita Nyong'o takes that position, basically gives the exact same wisdom with fewer words and much more wholesomeness, so that was completely pointless. And speaking of Lupita Nyong'o, it takes halfway through the movie for anyone to even acknowledge her existence, let alone for her to pop up into the movie. Her character did not go to T'Challa's funeral, and the excuse they give as to why not was such a steaming pile of bullshit. I can't even give a hint to you as to why it was bullshit without even spoiling it, but it pissed me off so much, and her entire purpose for entering the movie to begin with When I said about Okoye failing Wakanda, Okoye could have done exactly what Lupita did, and it would have served her character arc significantly better. She would have gotten the redemption that she deserves, as opposed to her redemption just being given back to her like it was absolutely nothing.
I'm sure with everything you just said, you're not so convinced that these characters are lead character material.
No, not really. It's just not the same without T'Challa. In the first film, the side characters were likable for this one passion of theirs that they cherished a great deal. Shuri's inventions, Okoye's loyalty to Wakanda, M'Baku's desire for independence for his own tribe, and the comedic back and forth banter that they had was engaging because the chemistry between the actors was very fun and likable. And that's because these actors were having such a good time with each other, which, of course, because of the darker tone in Boseman's death, it's not as engaging as before. I do respect the fact that the Marvel comedy is considerably toned down. It's still there and it's still insufferable, but it's nowhere near as bad as something like She-Hulk. But not only is it not engaging because they're not having as much fun as they used to, it's also because these characters do not have fully fleshed out backstories within the first film or this movie. You never find out why Okoye wanted to become a general. You never find out why M'Baku needed independence for his tribe or wants to, in some aspects, gain as much control over Wakanda as Shuri and her family. So these guys couldn't carry their own solo movie, let alone one that goes back and forth from being ensemble to being about Shuri. And Shuri is unfortunately the character they fuck up the most. Letitia Wright was good in the movie, but she could not save the material that she was given. I won't spoil how, but they try and take her in the Scarlet Witch route where the pain that she's been burying inside of her is making her more vengeful towards Namor and on the edge of becoming a villain. That's reflected in her new hairstyle and the Black Panther costume she picks. That's as much as I'm going to say without spoiling it to you, but I didn't buy it for one fucking second. You know she's not going to go down that route. You know she's going to make a last minute realization, and it's not a bad realization to have, but Marvel seriously expects us to wonder, is she going to go down that route? Of fucking course she's not. It would make sense for any other character but her, because every other character was capable of being that vengeful. And on top of that, the message that they come up with where engaging peace is considerably more important than carrying out vengeance, the movie backtracks that by having certain characters go, hey, are you sure we made the right decision? Or don't worry, we're gonna be just fine with this. And I just sat there and went, are you fucking kidding me?
You said you liked the citizens of this underwater civilization, but you didn't bring up Namor individually.
Yeah, because there's barely anything to bring up. I mean, I like the design on him. The wings on his ankles could have looked stupid, but they were actually pretty neat. And he's a more brutal villain than Killmonger, considering his minions slaughter people left and right without a hint of remorse. And the actor who plays him, he's alright, but his performance, again, wasn't anything special. In fact, his line delivery could be pretty monotonous and flat, and his arc, you've seen 1,000 times. The surface world wants to take his resources, especially white Americans, because why the fuck wouldn't they? And he wants Wakanda's help to strike back, and if they don't, he'll come after them too.
What's wrong with that? I mean, white societies and countries have colonized other countries for very minute and atrocious reasons, let alone resources and greed.
Yes, of course they have. Hell, white people colonizing other countries is exactly how my family came to Canada in the first place. Look what happened between Poland and Nazi Germany, or Poland and the Soviet Union. It did not end well. And look, it's wrong every time colonization or imperialism or whatever buzzwords that you come up with happens. But there are three problems I have with those themes being explored within the movie. The first one, while the Talcans stand out, the world they live in is barely explored compared to Wakanda. You don't know how their society functions. The underwater cinematography, for the most part, looks so dark and murky that you can't even make out what this world looks like, so it's hard to care what happens to it. And it doesn't help that most of the citizens are just background characters with no personality. I know I said earlier that it occasionally looked like they were actually swimming underwater, but there was so much dark shadows covering the actors that it didn't really make much of a difference. Second, Everett Ross is not a colonizer. He's a CIA agent who starts off with the surface level view of the world, but when T'Challa and Shuri save him and show him a world that he never knew about before, he's willing to overstep his boundaries in order to repay the life debt. That's not a colonizer. It's not even close. And for the black and brown characters in this movie to box in every white person they meet as a colonizer, which is interesting, the cultural significance of these movies being made in the first place is not to box in people based on their skin color, is grossly hypocritical. And it's a complete denial of the fact that human beings are individuals. And third, every race in existence has colonized, imperialized, enslaved, whatever words you want to use, to some other group of people for the sake of making a profit. I mean, seriously, look at Genghis Khan, or that guy from Last King of Scotland, or Rutaganda, responsible for the Rwandan genocide, or the Duvalier family in Haiti, which is ironic because Haiti is actually a setting within this movie. And, you know, as much as Namor complains about the surface world trying to steal their resources and supposedly come after them, even by the end of this movie, Wakanda is the only country, the only culture, civilization that even knows who these people are. Any of the Americans who are looking for their resources, they get slaughtered brutally so that the underwater group can cover their tracks. Which is also ironic considering the guy accusing other people of colonizing his territory keeps attacking other countries for the sake of waging a war. Any American or even Mayan during the certain flashbacks where we find out just how old Namor is and how long his culture has lived for, they make no attempt at peace whatsoever with people that, again, don't know who they are, how they operate. There's one entire scene where there's this ship in the ocean that they attack by soldiers who are trying to take their resources, but if they knew that this society, this civilization existed, they would have jumped ship and ran away. But of course, they get slaughtered so that no one finds out about their society, and whatever damage is left over gets blamed on by Wakanda. This message is so fucking inconsistent. How can you claim that your message is about valuing peace over revenge when you are calling every white person a colonizer in this movie out of revenge?
So, how was Ironheart?
Well, she, in my opinion, didn't really play that significant part of the movie. I mean, Dominique Thorne isn't technically bad in the movie. She does the most with what she can, but I think the first movie of replacing Tony Stark, a man who went from a spoiled brat, not giving a shit who his weapons were sold to and how they were used, to spending years repenting for the damage his company caused, using his inventions for good, and becoming a selfless hero willing to sacrifice himself for all of humanity, and replace that with a much younger, less experienced kid who thinks throwing a stereo can defend yourself from an armed warrior with a spear, and yet somehow has already built her first invention when she was 3, already has a prototype suit of her own that is so popular there are apparently sightings of her on YouTube, and she has no real lesson to learn, is beyond insulting. But then again, replacing a man with a more powerful woman is Marvel and Hollywood's general version of what girl power is.
Oh, please. When has a less experienced yet somehow stronger woman ever replaced a man in a Phase 4 movie?
There's Elsa Bloodstone outshining the werewolf in Werewolf by Night.
Yeah, that's true.
There's Cersei replacing her boyfriend as the leader of the Eternals.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness more being about the villain Scarlet Witch who gets absolved in such a cheap cop-out again.
Well, she was still good in it, though, wasn't she?
Or how Thor Love and Thunder gave more for Jane Foster to do than Thor.
Okay, that's valid.
Or how alternate Loki outperforms Loki in every conceivable way.
You made your point.
Or how Moon Knight gets his ass saved by his wife so much you wonder why the show wasn't just about her.
Please tell me you do not have another example for this.
Or how, as opposed to casting a new actor about a multiverse version of T'Challa that the Wakandans have to learn to trust and work with in order to save the world and deal with their own shared grief, replace with Shuri.
All right. I get it, but I just don't get what the problem with that is. What's wrong with a female-led superhero movie or having female characters outshine male characters?
Hey, As long as the movie is good and the characters are well written, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You're looking at a guy who has 2 tattoos of characters that are really already in my background. And you're looking at a guy who saw Birds of Prey 3 times in theaters. But I didn't go see it because it was women kicking ass and nothing else, although that was pretty fine to look at every now and then. It was because the action scenes were filmed in steady wide shots. The actresses did their own elaborate choreography, which was based in martial arts, cleverly improvised weapons, and creative set pieces and environments, as opposed to just guns and superpowers. The actresses all had great personalities. Harley is charmingly psychotic. Huntress is a hilariously awkward wannabe badass. Kind of like Webby, when you really think about it. Black Canary's snarky attitude is enticing, and Montoya is so confidently corny in how much she wants to be an 80s cop, and their simplistic backstories still had a lot where we can imagine what these women are like as people. Sure, they all had toxic male stereotypes as the villains, but their personalities were what made them memorable, and the fact that each of them were lawbreakers that let other people get hurt or did the hurting for them actually makes them more flawed human beings than I think people give them credit for.
Okay, well, with everything you just mentioned about Wakanda Forever, there's really only one question I have. Why did you go see it? In fact, there are other questions I have for you. Why not just stay home and watch something you know for a fact you're going to like, or go back to a theater playing something you loved the first time and want to see it again?
Because you never know when a movie is going to be good or not until you see it. And I want these movies to be as exciting, magical, and inspiring as the ones I grew up watching. I saw a trailer for the new Ant-Man movie, and I like the world of the quantum realm that they show. I want to see what Kang's like as a character. Paul Rudd showed his dramatic chops in Endgame without even speaking. I want to see more of the Pym family in action working together as a team. And I like the more dramatic tone the trailer claims the movie's going to have.
But this can all be a lie, and Marvel trailers have felt completely different from the finished product in your eyes lately, haven't they?
Yeah, they absolutely have. Even the movies that I've enjoyed this year.
Well then, what's the value of giving money to a company or brand that you can't stand anymore?
Well, no studio only makes bad movies. There's always going to be something like Multiverse of Madness or Werewolf by Night that makes up for Love and Thunder or She-Hulk. Seeing these movies despite my assumptions should prove to others that I can at least walk into a movie with an open mind, acknowledge that even bad movies have good qualities about them, as I had mentioned, and if nothing else, I need to get out of the house more often, and movie theaters need to make money.
Well, that's certainly a commendable attribute, and I wish you the best with that decision. It is your choice after all, but I would recommend that you continue watching movies that you have already seen, movies that you have purchased on Blu-ray, and spend as much time, if not in some cases more, on those than movies that are in theaters that you go see purely out of boredom or curiosity, not because you wish to see them. I mean, movies are art, they're entertainment, and you should watch them because you actually want to. So with that in mind, there's one task I'm going to assign you for our next session. Watch a movie you've seen before that you know and love. Make a short video explaining why you like it, and keep revisiting it. Is that understood?
Understood, Doc. That's understood. I know exactly what I'm going to do next.
Good. That's all the time we have for today. If you have seen Black Panther Wakanda Forever, let us know in the comments below what you thought of it. Stay tuned for more therapeutic reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.